Seems pretty balanced to me. Hello everybody, it's Hater. Welcome back to another Destiny 2 build video. And here we are talking about Starfire Protocol again. Okay. I swear, I'm really starting to feel like a broken record at this point. But honestly, you guys can't even blame me. The people you should really be blaming now is Bungie, because somehow they keep buffing everything about Starfire Protocol, except its fashion. Like, seriously, look at this thing. It looks like if you turned a heated blanket inside out and wore it. Ugh. I swear, the same day that Starfire Protocol gets an ornament is the same day that Gambit will become a functioning game mode. But fashion aside though, with the most recent patch reworking the mod system as a whole and adding new fragments to the light subclasses, Starfire Protocol received a humongous indirect buff. And with the build we'll be going over in today's video, we're not only going to be able to dish out over 2.5 million damage in a single damage phase, but constantly refresh our super and become practically immortal. So to get things started, if you need a refresher on what Starfire Protocol does, its exotic perk, Fusion Harness, gives us a second fusion grenade. Then whenever we deal the term empowered weapon damage, it will refund those fusion grenades. This basically means increased weapon damage only provided inside both Well of Radiance and the Empowering Rift, not other buffs like Radiant or weapon perks, which even though they say that they buff weapon damage, they aren't considered empowered weapon damage. Then finally, to top all this off, fusion grenades will also fully refund our Rift energy. As for the exotic that's going to pair best with this build, it's going to be Witherhoard. We're practically going to be using it like a Swiss Army knife, dealing with ads, champions, bosses, my ex-wife Karen. However, the real reason we're using it in the build in the first place is for a special interaction it has with Starfire Protocol. As everyone knows, if you directly hit an enemy with Witherhoard, it will apply a damage over time effect. If we take that and stand inside of a Empowering Rift or Well of Radiance, for example, that damage over time effect is going to be considered empowered weapon damage, allowing us to indefinitely refund our grenade energy. This is going to be the bread and butter of the entire build and basically act as a skeleton for us to build upon. Speaking of which, let's get into the subclass, and to start, Empowering Rift is going to be our Rift of choice. We'll be using this in tandem with one of the new fragments. I will note though, depending on how difficult the content is, you can still swap this out for Healing Rift if you feel like the extra survivability is necessary. Touch of Flame and Icarus Dash are going to be our aspects of choice. Touch of Flame is going to buff all of our grenades. In the case of fusion grenades, it's going to make them explode twice, meaning they deal more damage overall and apply twice as many Scorch stacks. Icarus Dash, on the other hand, is more quality of life than anything. If you enjoy the playstyle of Heat Rises, you're more than welcome swapping it out. Fragments though are where this build cranks up to 11, and starting from the left, we're using Ember of Torches. This gives us the Radiant buff every time we hit an enemy with our melee attack, buffing weapon damage by 25%. Ember of Ashes to cause all Scorch stacks we create to create 50% more. Then from here, we're using both the updated Ember of Searing and the new Ember of Resolve. Searing is going to give us melee energy every time we kill something that is scorched. Then, its new effect also creates a fire sprite whenever something scorched dies. To give you guys a quick rundown on what fire sprites are, they function the exact same way as stasis shards, but are going to give grenade energy instead of melee energy. And just like stasis shards, you can build into them to give us even more than just ability energy. Solar Surge from the artifact this season is a great example. Now, on top of gaining grenade energy, we also receive a stack of armor charge whenever we pick up fire sprites. Now, moving on to Ember of Resolve, this solves one of the only glaring issues with Starfire Protocol: survivability when using Empowering Rift. All it does is simply cause all kills with grenades to heal us, and in such a heavily focused grenade build, we'll practically never die as long as we're throwing and killing things with grenades. Something else that I can note here, if you're not comfortable running Ember of Resolve in harder content, you could easily swap it out for the other new fragment, Ember of Mercy, where whenever we res an ally, everyone around, including ourselves, will gain restoration. Then any fire sprite we pick up also gives us restoration. The main reason we would use this is for the second half of the fragment, but overall, it offers a completely different level of comfortability when using the build. Now onto our armor, they're pretty much going to vary based on whether we're doing either boss DPS or general use, and both loadouts I showed in the intro we're going to be going over anyways. But to start off, let's talk about the general use loadout since it's what we'll use more often than not. Starting off with the helmet, we're using 2 ashes to assets, and I'm pretty sure you guys know why. As for the mod at the very end though, it's a void siphon to create orbs from my funnel web. With volatile flow making a return and orbs of power being so easy to create, using a void weapon for free volatile rounds is a no-brainer. However, if you feel like using any other element, you can swap any of the upcoming elemental mods in the build to fit your needs. Next up though, over at the arms, we're using 2 firepower mods. These are going to cause our grenades to create orbs of power, and since we're using 2 of them, the orbs are going to be larger and give us more super energy when we pick them up. As for the mod at the very end though, it's mostly preference, but I enjoy using a Font of Vigor to bump up my strength stat. If you want, you could swap this out for something like Momentum Transfer or even Shield Break Charge. Any of these 3 mods will get the job done. Moving on over to the chest piece, we're using a Charged Up to increase our max stacks of armor charge by 1, then whatever resistance mod we want at the end. I use a Concussive Dampener, mostly because, well, I'm lazy, but any other resistance mod in its place is perfectly fine. Next up, moving on over to the boots, and we're using stacks on stacks, so anytime we gain a stack of armor charge, we gain 1 additional stack. As for the other mods, we're using 2 elemental surge mods to buff up an element's damage by 17%. In the general use version of this build, I prefer using 2 void ones for my funnel web, but depending on what you want to use in your build, you can change these to whatever element you want. Finally though, moving on over to the bond, we're using a time dilation so armor charge stacks we have decay at a slower pace. And then for the rest, we're using 2 bomber mods so that we gain extra grenade energy every time we use our empowering rift. Now that we got the overall general use build out of the way, let's move on to the DPS build. But before we do anything, I need to address something. This mod setup heavily relies on the use of a demolitionist rocket launcher, the 2 most popular being Hothead and the Bump in the Night. I use a crafted Bump in the Night for my loadout with enhanced demolitionist and enhanced frenzy. But if you guys don't have that, you can focus Hotheads if you've earned one already from Zavala and try and get a demolitionist explosive light roll. I highly recommend you do so for this build, because from this point on, we're going to be breaking down the armor with Bump in the Night in mind. If you're using Hothead, then change all of the upcoming elemental mods to match it. Starting at the helmet, it's going to be the same as our general use build with 2 ashes to assets and an elemental orb spawning mod. But something you could do if your team needs it is swap one of the ashes to assets out and replace it with Radiant Light. This is going to immediately give everyone stacks of armor charge when you cast your super. Moving on over to the arms, this is where things start to change for the build. First things first, we're still using a firepower mod to create orbs of power from grenade kills, but now we're using 2 stasis reloader mods. Later on when I break down the 2.5 million damage phase, I'll explain why we're using this even though our rocket launcher has demolitionist on it. But to move things forward, let's move on over to the chest piece. And here we're using 2 stasis reserve mods so our Bump in the Night can have 9 rockets instead of 7 total. Then over at the boots, this is the most important part, because we're using 3 elemental surge mods that match our rocket's element typing. Because we're using 3 of them, it's going to increase Bump in the Night's damage by 22% whenever we have stacks of armor charge. And just like Font of Might in the old system, this damage buff is going to stack on top of Well of Radiance's 25%, allowing us to deal a lot more damage overall. Finally though, over at the bond, we've replaced the 2 bomber mods with an extra time dilation. This is just going to allow us to get the most out of our armor charge stacks. But now with both of the builds completely broken down, let's talk about how this works in practice. And for the damage phase, we'll be using the DPS build. Something that I do want you guys to clarify with your team when you're running this build is if you're going into any kind of content that is 3-man or up, this is dungeons or raids for example, make sure that your team knows you're using Witherhoard, because with how the gun is coded, there can only be 2 instances of Witherhoard active on one enemy at a time. one person who's direct impacting the enemy and the other shooting it at the floor for a puddle. Once you get that figured out, you're pretty much good to go, and we can start talking about the damage phase. And for the damage phase, we'll be using the DPS build on the Ogre boss from Grasp of Avarice. So to start off, the moment that the crystal finishes charging, we're going to tag the boss with Witherhoard and immediately open up by throwing a grenade, shooting a rocket, throwing another grenade, using our melee, shooting a rocket, throwing a grenade, then using Witherhoard to reproc its DOT. From here, it's going to be a very simple rinse and repeat cycle where we throw a grenade to reproc our Demolitionist, shoot a rocket, reload, but cancel the reload animation by throwing another grenade the moment we see the rocket's been loaded, and then we'll swap back to Witherhoard and reapply its DOT. After that, we swap back to the rocket, shoot, and rinse and repeat the cycle until we're out of rockets or the damage phase is over. If you've done everything correctly, then you should deal just above 2.5 million damage, just like in my clip. But overall, I think that's gonna be... Huh? Wait, what do you mean you can deal more damage if you include Galahorn and a tether? One phase the boss? There's no way. What do you mean you have a clip proving it? Show me. Overall though guys, for real this time, I think that's gonna be it for today's video. Starfire Protocol is absolutely busted, and I wouldn't be surprised if Bungie ends up nerfing it, but honestly, I don't think that day is gonna come until we finally get an ornament for it. Seriously Bungie, I'm practically begging you at this point. Give me a Starfire Protocol ornament. But either way, if you guys want to copy both of the builds I went over in today's video, then there will be 2 dim loadout links down in the description. And while you're at it, the best way to show support to the channel is by giving the video a like and subscribing so you'll never miss out on a brand new video. I also started streaming over here on YouTube, so if you guys want to drop by, ask questions about build crafting, or check out any of the builds that I'm working on, then I stream almost every single day. You'll see a video at the top of my channel, usually with my robot face on it. Overall, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm going to catch you in the next one. Bye bye.